Is this thing on? Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am Aatish Ramkaran, and I'm here to talk to you about what's the big deal about money anyway. I'm also one of the co-founders of BECSA, the Blockchain Entrepreneurs Club South Africa. I think a lot of you who probably would have come to our events. Some of the usual suspects from the BECSA and Blink crowd also lurking in the room. Let's move on. So, my story begins. I was at a braai, minding my own business, and a family braai. And my brother-in-law and my cousin come up to me, and obviously they're chartered accountants because we're Indian. And what they say is, listen, this Bitcoin thing, it's like a scam, right? How does it possibly have any value? I mean, come on, really? I was accosted by accountants. Anyway, my immediate reaction basically was nerd rage. But I harnessed my power, and at that time, basically, it was August 2017. Bitcoin was starting to go up. It was so hot right then. And I ended up writing an article about how to value Bitcoin, specifically if you're not an economist. Because as I started digging into this, I started realizing that economists and people that have been dealing with money for a very, very long time don't see money the way the rest of us do. And certainly not the way I did. I mean, it turns out that I knew very little about money, and I went down this, this journey to actually find out. But the journey is not easy. John Oliver, this is a great quote when he describes Bitcoin. It's everything you don't understand about money combined with everything you don't understand about computers. Now, the one advantage that I have is that I do understand something about computers. So I thought, okay, cool, this money thing, how hard could it be? So I started at the beginning. So, Apple, no, sorry, not the share. Ultimately, we need to think about what we do with money. What are the functions of money? And one of the easiest things to understand is that it must be a store of value, okay? If I was storing my value in something that would rot overnight or could be eaten by rats or birds or whatever, this would not be a very, very good form of wealth storage or value storage. So money must be able to, you must be able to store value in money. My friend Bessie here leads us into the next function of money, which is ultimately to be a medium of exchange. If you can't use this thing, your store of value, to exchange for other things that you want, it's not particularly useful. Now, I know generally, when we spoke of like barter economies in the past, you have something, I have something, I'll trade you this for that. Now that is kind of exchange, and cows are divisible, so, not so great for the cow, but hey. And then the last function of money, which is something we often take for granted, is that it must also be a unit of account. Money, in many ways, basically, is kind of like a social lubricant. Not the ones we're going to have after my talk, but it's a form of actually organizing societies. It solves this thing called coincidence of wants. You want a divorce, not you, Paul, sorry, and I want fish. So, if all I have is bananas and you want this other thing, I need to go and find a divorce lawyer for you to give you a divorce so you can give me fish. It becomes very complicated. Sorry about the divorce thing. But ultimately, we need to be able to measure the goods and services, a common yardstick, and that's money. Money has taken many strange and wonderful forms. This is a rye stone from the island of Yap in the South Pacific. Some of these stones were about 4 meters across in diameter and weighed about 8 tons. So, a smash and grab was not a situation that the Yap Islanders actually ever needed to deal with. But it was a very interesting form of money. And money has taken other bizarre forms. In Africa, we used baboon bones, cowrie shells, glass beads were popular, and limestone rye stones were apparently was a thing. You may be familiar with this, gold. Look how shiny it is. Gold is quite rare. It's also very pretty, but ultimately, it has a few industrial uses. I mean, in dentistry, we use it for fillings and stuff. It makes you look quite dodgy. But most of the time, we're using it for jewelry. Other times, we use it as a semiconductor in electronics. But I'll tell you what, the Egyptians who made this necklace were not using it to build laptops. So, why gold?
Donuts, tepid lemonade. Get out of it. Redskins, donuts, tepid lemonade.
Okay, I'll take 5 of your Redskins and one of those tepid lemonades.
It's one chicken, mate. It's not a chicken.
No, that's much better than a chicken, my friend. That is gold.
What?
Gold. The currency of the future.
Great, come back in the future. Ratskin,
No, mate, I don't think you understand. This has unlimited use.
can I eat it?
No.
Can I wear it?
No.
Can I use it as firewood?
No.
It's starting to sound pretty limited, mate.
But you can melt it and then turn it into whatever you want.
Can I turn it into food?
No, you can't.
Is this going to take long?
Hold on your horses, mate. We are dealing in futures here.
Oh, what's that? Is that a rock?
No, worse, it's cold.
Oh, cold. How do I get some cold?
Gold. I have people mining for it.
Oh, you have people. La-dee-da. We've got a rich one here, eh? What do you pay them with?
Gold.
Next!
No, they say that this currency could be worth 1,000 ratskins, maybe even more, in just a few years.
Says who?
The people with gold.
Fuck. Next!
Look, every economy ever has been controlled by the big chicken banks.
Next!
And this is our opportunity to get out from under the big chicken boots,
Fuck me.
shake up the market, and start taking back our economic independence. Are you with me?
No.
Really? Come on, man. Look, all my mates are doing it.
I'll just get your hand off it, alright? Everyone's trying to predict the next alt rock. First it was stone, then bronze, then iron, now gold. What can I even do with this shiny shit? Make fucking jewellery out of it or something?
Yes, you can do that. Great idea, because it's malleable. And best part of all, there's fuck all of it. It's a finite resource.
Mate, I'll tell you what a finite resource is. My fucking patience, right? Now piss off!
You know what? Stuff it. I'm taking it back. It's like talking to my dad.
Yeah. Why'd you go discover avocado and smash it on toast, you dickhead?
Yeah, maybe I will.
Sorry, mate.
I'll have a dodo head, thanks.
Half a chicken. Piss on me, not you two.
Oh, no. This is way better than gold. It's silver, or as I like to call it, white gold cash. It's faster to mine. It's...
It's got to be the last one, surely. Ratskins, dodo heads, very tepid lemonade. Get it here.
I wouldn't ask too many questions about that lemonade. But gold is a pretty strange thing, but we all accept that it has value and was traded quite successfully for about 3,000 years. That's about as old as the oldest gold coin. Turns out why gold actually had such lasting appeal is that it had some great properties that made it great for those functions of money I spoke to you about. The first one was that gold is quite scarce. It's actually one of the rarest materials on Earth, and it's very difficult to find, very difficult to pull out of the ground and refine, so there's not a lot of it. It was extremely durable. Gold is an extremely stable element, and even like ancient gold coins from 3,000 years ago basically are ultimately just fine. It was also relatively portable. I mean, you could carry like little coins of gold around with you. It was also fungible, which meant exchangeable. So if I have a nugget of gold and you have a nugget of gold that's of equal weight, these are of equivalent value. And the last bit, which is quite important, is that it was also acceptable. Everybody wanted gold, not for gold in and of itself, but because they wanted fish or divorces or whatever it is. And they knew that everybody else wanted gold, and therefore gold was great. But nobody really uses gold anymore unless you take your pirate cosplay really seriously, like disturbingly seriously. Get a life. But why don't we use gold anymore? You know, there's lots of, there's a very interesting part of history, but ultimately we had cataclysmic events around the world, like that's World War I over there with a mule and a gas mask, which is just bizarre. There was the Great Depression in the US, and ultimately what that led to were banks suspending the gold standard and governments suspending the gold standard so they could create a lot more money out of nothing, not limited by the amount of gold that they had, so they could do whatever they want. My good friend Richard Nixon here, remember, not a crook, took America off the gold standard in 1971, and it was meant to be a temporary measure, and America has never once returned to a gold-backed currency. This is Milton Friedman, a Nobel Prize-winning economist, who deciphers basically why does those little bits of paper actually have any money. It's because everybody thinks they have value. That's basically fiat currency. Now, if that's true, this is an interesting stat. This is the amount of countries around the world and the amount of gold that they actually own. And you'll notice for the last couple of years, they've been selling off a lot of gold. And then suddenly, it starts to flip over here. And look at the date. 2008 global financial crisis. It seems like reserve banks around the world basically have been stockpiling gigantic amounts of gold. 46% year on year for 2018. Interesting. And also, funnily enough, I also ring that in red there. India is in 12th position. Now, listen, I'm Indian, and it surprises the hell out of me that India is 12th when we have stuff like this going on. Okay? That's just nuts. Anybody been to an Indian wedding? Are you crazy? Whatever. Another interesting thing is that most money, and this is something that, I guess most of us in the room probably know this already, but 92% to 95% of all the money in the world is actually in digital form. It's not actually in bits of paper or in coins. It actually exists in, in bank servers around the world. So, if money has value because people think it has value, belief, faith, and if most of it is digital, then what I said to my accountant brother-in-law and my accountant family was that, well, Bitcoin isn't that strange anymore because it is a digital form of money and it has value because other people are willing to accept it and buy it and people treat it that way. However, what's really interesting is that Bitcoin is better than just that. You know this whole thing about mining? It's like it's going to eat the world's electricity supply and it's very difficult to do and you need massive data centers to do it. It turns out that pulling Bitcoin out of the internet basically is actually quite difficult. And when you really think about this, nothing of value in your life was ever achieved easily. If you value it, you had to work to get it. And this is the important thing that Bitcoin actually starts to bring back, this notion of what we call sound money. And before we get into the details of the electricity supply, anybody want to hazard a guess? And those of you who've played this game with me before, please refrain. But would anybody like to hazard a guess as to when this photo was taken? This is a gold mine in Brazil called the Sierra Pelada. Anybody? Not bad. 1986. Thanks for playing. But this is an open pit mine in Brazil. And each one of those little dots there basically are humans that are effectively just wearing rags and are trying to actually mine gold ore out of the ground. This is what we've been using gold for longer than 3,000 years. We've been using gold as a currency for 3,000 years, but we've been actually mining gold and making jewelry out of it basically far longer than that. This is what we've been doing to people to actually pull gold out of the ground. This is what we've been doing to the Amazon based on the runoff from refineries that process that gold. This is what a Bitcoin mine looks like. The only human tragedy here is this poor gent who has to rewire these things if something goes wrong. But that's what it is, ultimately, a data center. Nobody's forced to work in there. People are incentivized to do so. And just to touch on electricity, it's a sore point for me. Because if you find a seam of gold somewhere, like the Witwatersrand, trouble is, there's not a handy power plant right there, an oil well right next to the gold mine. So if you actually want the energy and to perform work and have vehicles actually dig the ground, pull things out and refine it, you need to build all that infrastructure. You need to build power right next to it. But Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies exist on the internet, both nowhere and somewhere. And what that means is you can choose to mine anywhere you want to. What's powerful about that is, cool, if that's the case, then I'll like to build my mine next to the cheapest source of power possible, and that is hydroelectric or renewable supplies. In fact, recent stats show about somewhere around 70% of all Bitcoin mining is actually done based on renewables because it's the cheapest form of electricity. This is a geothermal vent in Iceland called Krafla. People have built Bitcoin mining farms basically directly on top of these geothermal vents, literally a power station that has a data center connected to it. So Bitcoin's so great, but the price, you say, the humanity of it all. If it's so awesome, basically, then how do you explain this? From its high point in December 2017, anybody remember that? Anybody? Who bought in? Anyone? Right, yeah, she gets it. 81% down. I mean, it's crazy, right? I mean, oh my God, the banks were right. But luckily, we have large corporates who are going to come and do better. Facebook has announced a cryptocurrency. They did say it's going to be for WhatsApp, but most likely it'll be for their super app, like Bronwyn was talking about. It's going to be backed by the dollar. And if Facebook does launch this, Facebook overnight will become the largest financial institution the world has ever seen with 2 billion customers, or 2 billion potential customers. That's a picture of my good friend Mark Zuckerberg testifying before Congress on suspicion of Russian interference with the elections. Yes, my bet on the name is Zuckcoin, or at the very least, it's going to Zuck. This is JPM coin, or this is Jamie Dimon. He's the head of JP Morgan, one of the largest banks in the world. And they've announced a cryptocurrency as well that's also backed by the dollar. And what's really interesting is there's a little architectural diagram that comes from their website, actually talking about how it's going to work. And you'll notice there's a blockchain, there's a bank, there's arrows on the outside basically showing people like throwing their money in, and the money goes into the blockchain, stuff happens in the blockchain, and look, when the money leaves the blockchain, it goes back to that bank then and back to the people, because that's a great use for blockchain. Put it behind a bank. And that's Jamie Dimon also testifying before he was fined, his bank was fined $13 billion for misleading investors as part of the lead up to the 2008 global financial crisis. You would have noticed that picture I showed earlier of the Great Depression. You know the migrant mother? That's the iconic image of the Depression. And again, just a very brief little history lesson. The Depression almost collapsed the United States. It led to almost a wholesale move to fiat currencies around the world. People tally the global cost of the Great Depression. It cost the world $396 billion in today's money. And this is one of the largest cataclysmic financial events ever. People still talk about the Great Depression. Do you know what the 2008 global financial crisis cost the world? Anybody want to take a guess? In today's money. Anyone? 500 billion, a trillion. Anyone? Somewhere between 15 and 22 trillion dollars. Somewhere there's a button that people are pressing that keeps printing money. There's this concept called quantitative easing. The bill is going to come due. And when you think about the size of the global financial crisis versus what happened in the Great Depression, what the Great Depression led to. But back to some tinfoil hat theories. So this is my good friend Charlie Day. What's interesting about what's happening with Facebook and JPM coin, or JP Morgan, is that what it is potentially leading to is the rise of what I call almost private central banks. Because Facebook gets to issue this cryptocurrency. I mean, they say it's backed by the dollar. JPM coin is doing exactly the same thing. They are tethering, some guys will get it, their coin to the dollar. So ultimately, it's a fiat-backed crypto coin. However, if you have 2 billion people using your coin, and maybe about 5 years from now, basically, you say, well, everyone's using it. It's like it's distributed. People never leave the system. They're all transacting in Facebook coin. They earn their livelihoods in Facebook coin. They pay for goods and services in Facebook coin, like on a super app. Why am I pegging this thing to the damn dollar? I'll just disconnect it. Nixon did it, right? And then suddenly you have the private central bank. JP Morgan could do the same thing. So this next slide, I have to begin with a disclaimer. The following does not constitute financial advice. Aatish Ramkaran is not a licensed financial service provider. It's a matter of perspective, okay? On the same time horizon, if we look at December 2017 to January, it's an 81% drop. But if you look at it from 2011 to January, it's an 826,179% gain. Take from that what you will, but it's something that is not forced upon people. You have no choice today regarding the use of fiat currency. If you want to use money, you have to use money that's issued to you by a bank that goes through a bunch of intermediaries and ultimately is administered and regulated by ultimately the Bank of International Settlement in Switzerland. And this is a very interesting quote. They plunder, they slaughter, and they steal. This they falsely name empire, and where they make a wasteland, they call it peace. This was a quote, it's a tribute to a man named Calgacus, who was the chieftain of the Caledonians in AD 98. Caledonia is modern-day Scotland. And he was fighting the Romans and the Roman Empire that was effectively like crushing his people. And when we think about what we do and what a global order of banking and fiat currency and money printing and quantitative easing has actually done, we have people that are trapped in structural poverty. We have people that are trapped earning cents that in a very short period of time basically is not really worth anything anymore. Money is ultimately inflating, prices are inflating. This is not a good situation. But if you try and use something else, suddenly it's a threat. This is going to destroy the banking system. Financial instability. I'm not sure if anybody read the statement from the Bank of International Settlement like yesterday about how Bitcoin and crypto assets are presenting a financial stability risk. I love the way they phrased it. A financial stability risk to banks. But cool, let's move on. But ultimately, I could talk to you about smart contracts, about blockchains, elliptic curve cryptography, hashing, and these are all wonderful things, and there are far smarter people in the room that can talk to you about this. But ultimately, for me, what Bitcoin represents is choice. It represents options. It represents a way of actually being able to preserve your wealth. It It represents a way of you being able to exchange with other people without any borders, without any rules in place. And people can scare you and tell you things like, yes, it'll be used for drugs and terrorist financing. It seems like drug dealers and terrorists are doing just fine without Bitcoin. So take from that what you will. But the best part about this is that it's not something that is mandated by any government. There's nobody in charge telling you you must use Bitcoin, you must use Ethereum. It is your choice to do so. And you know, the fact that it's actually survived for 10 years and is growing in adoption, this is what I believe the future of the world is going to be. Thank you very much.